I wouldn't have said so, no. Not really. But no, I don't get the feeling that she's wildly optimistic about life. But a pragmatist, I think.
3 minutes. That was all it took for a private disagreement inside the royal household to become something far more dangerous. William had made his position clear. Catherine stood beside him, and when Camilla attempted to push through a decision neither of them believed she had the authority to make, they stopped her. But the confrontation itself was only the beginning, because Princess Anne was carrying proof that this moment had been anticipated long before today. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William placed the proposed directive on the table and kept his hand beside it. The document called for a restructuring of royal household access, meaning Camilla's office would gain influence over Kensington Palace engagements, family briefings, and ceremonial arrangements. Kensington Palace, the residence and working base of the Prince and Princess of Wales, represented control over their schedule, staff, and preparation for a future closer to the crown. William looked directly at Camilla. This does not happen. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Catherine stayed beside him. She understood that accepting the instruction once could create a precedent, a past decision later used to justify similar interference. Camilla turned toward her, expecting hesitation, but the princess confirmed that their household would not enact the changes. Her refusal transformed the moment from a disagreement between two offices into something personal. Kate was defending the boundaries around her family, while the queen consort faced the realization that husband and wife had reached the same conclusion. Anne entered before the silence could soften. She carried a sealed folder from her private records, and William recognized why she had come. In a documented account kept after a conversation years earlier, the Princess Royal, the monarch's sister and a senior working member of the family, had recorded concerns about the independence of the Wales household. William had contacted her minutes before, because he believed Camilla's directive crossed the boundary they had once discussed. Anne broke her silence through that written account and a private conversation with William and Catherine. She told them the late queen had feared a collision in which loyalty to the sovereign might be confused with surrendering control of the heir's household. She and William had therefore formed a quiet protective pact. If that boundary was ever crossed, Anne would support his right to resist. Camilla stared at the folder, but she still misunderstood what had happened. She believed she had lost one argument. What she had not yet discovered was whose warning had inspired the pact, or what Anne's record said about the night everything began. Power inside a royal family rarely announces itself with shouting. Sometimes it appears in silence, in who refuses to sit, who avoids another person's eyes, and who realizes that an alliance has formed without them. William fears losing control of the future. Catherine fears becoming vulnerable inside her own household. Camilla fears isolation. And Anne fears something different altogether, that an old warning is finally becoming reality. William kept his attention on the disputed directive because Kensington Palace meant more than residence. It was the base where he and Catherine managed staff, engagements, family schedules, and preparations for the crown. The Prince of Wales, the title traditionally held by the monarch's senior heir, understood that outside control over those decisions could shape how he prepared for kingship. Catherine understood the danger. She had spent years balancing duty with protected family life, and the restructuring threatened that line. Camilla looked from husband to wife and saw what disturbed her. They had already agreed. She asked William why nobody had consulted her before rejecting the proposal. He answered carefully. Consultation, he said, was not the same as permission. The queen consort, the title given to the reigning king's wife, absorbed the distinction in silence. Catherine watched her reaction without satisfaction. Defending a boundary could still wound someone standing on the other side. Anne carried conflict. She loved Charles as her brother, yet she believed the monarchy survived through boundaries strong enough to outlast personal loyalties. When Camilla briefly left, Princess Anne asked William to remain. In that private conversation, she admitted that the documented account inside her folder recorded an understanding formed years earlier. If Charles learned how long she had kept it from him, the king might see her silence as betrayal. William listened, as Anne explained that the pact had not been created after Charles became sovereign. Its origins reached back into Elizabeth II's final years, when succession, the transfer of the crown from one monarch to the next, became personal. Her written account recorded conversations in which the late queen worried that future household pressure could weaken the independence William would need before taking the throne. Catherine learned something unexpected. Anne's promise had never protected William alone. The documented understanding specifically extended to the future Prince and Princess of Wales, because Elizabeth believed the heir's marriage and household had to remain stable under internal pressure. Kate looked at Anne and asked the question nobody else had dared to ask. What happened that made her believe this would become necessary? Anne paused before answering. To understand the pact, they would have to return to one forgotten Windsor gathering. The night a minor disagreement became the warning Elizabeth never forgot. The pact did not begin with today's confrontation. It began at Windsor, during a private family dinner that was supposed to demonstrate unity. There were no cameras, no public statements, and no reason for anyone outside the family to remember the evening. But Anne remembered. William never forgot it, and Elizabeth noticed something others dismissed. A conversation about future royal households had crossed an invisible line, revealing a struggle that could become far more serious after her death. Camilla raised the question casually. Once Charles became king, she argued, the central royal household should have final oversight over major scheduling and ceremonial decisions made by the next Prince and Princess of Wales. The royal household meant the staff and offices that organize a senior royal's public duties and working life. William heard something deeper, his future family structure being negotiated before he had inherited the role. Elizabeth said nothing at first. She watched William set down his glass and withdraw from the conversation, and Anne saw her mother's expression change. The Queen understood why the moment mattered. If the heir's household lost practical independence, disputes over diaries, staff, and ceremonial choices could become battles over authority. Camilla continued speaking, but the silence around William had already become the loudest response in the room. William found Anne after dinner and spoke privately. He told his aunt that he would serve the monarch loyally, but he would not allow his marriage or children to become extensions of another household's internal politics. The prince sounded controlled, yet the frustration beneath his words unsettled her. Anne did not dismiss it. She had watched Elizabeth notice the same danger. Elizabeth called Anne aside for a private conversation and spoke with sadness rather than anger. She did not condemn Camilla. Instead, the monarch admitted that strong personalities could collide once her stabilizing presence was gone. She asked her daughter to become an informal guardian of institutional boundaries, meaning someone who would defend clear limits between royal households when family pressure threatened to blur them. Anne acted on that request. In a later private conversation, she promised William that if interference ever threatened his household's independence, she would support his right to resist it. She then created a private memorandum, a written record of the discussion rather than a legal command, documenting Elizabeth's reasoning and her fear that family disagreements could turn into struggles for operational control. Now Anne placed that memorandum before William. Camilla's directive echoed the old Windsor argument word for word. The past had collided with the present, and when the Queen Consort understood that her proposal had activated a warning recorded years earlier, restraint was about to disappear. There was no raised platform, no ceremony, and no audience to soften what happened next. 4 members of the royal family stood within arm's reach of one another, while years of unspoken resentment surfaced in minutes. Camilla wanted an explanation. William wanted the interference stopped. Catherine wanted her boundaries respected. But it was Anne, quiet, deliberate, almost painfully calm, who delivered the sentence that changed the balance inside the room. Camilla demanded to know why William had treated an instruction from the king's household as though it carried no weight. The king's household, the staff and offices that support the sovereign's official work, could coordinate with other royal teams, but William insisted coordination was not control. He told her the dispute was never about Charles's authority. It was about her office trying to exercise power over decisions that belonged to his own household. Catherine answered before the tension could shift back to her husband. The proposed arrangement, she said, would have placed Camilla's staff inside decisions involving Wales engagements and internal briefings. Buckingham Palace, the monarch's principal working residence and administrative center, would remain a partner, not a command post over Kensington Palace. Kate said she would cooperate fully, but she would not surrender control over the structure protecting her family and public work. Camilla turned directly toward Catherine. Was this truly William's decision, she asked, or had his wife pushed him toward it? The princess did not let the prince answer. It is ours, she said. The words landed harder than an accusation, because they removed the possibility of division. Camilla had expected a disagreement she could isolate. Instead, she found a marriage standing as one front. William finally lost his restraint when Camilla argued that loyalty to the crown demanded flexibility. He pushed his chair backward and stood. Loyalty, the future king said, could not mean allowing personal boundaries to vanish whenever another office demanded access. The sudden movement silenced everyone. Catherine remained beside him, and Anne watched the moment with the grim recognition that the warning recorded years earlier had arrived. Anne then spoke with deliberate calm. Through the private conversations she had held with Queen Elizabeth, and the written memorandum she created afterward, she confirmed that she had advised William to reject the directive. Princess Anne, the king's sister and a senior working royal, explained that her promise had always included protecting Catherine's position, as well as his independence. Camilla understood at last. This was not spontaneous resistance. It was an old safeguard. She said Charles would hear everything. William answered, he should. And when the king was brought into the dispute, family loyalty itself would be tested before the entire family fractured. Princess Anne had never needed a crown to command a room. Her influence came from something harder to challenge. Decades of duty, proximity to the late queen, and a reputation for speaking only when she believed something mattered. Now the secret pact was finally being explained in full. It was not a scheme to undermine Charles. It was a safeguard designed to stop one generation of the monarchy from consuming the independence of the next. Anne held the memorandum before approaching her brother. The private memorandum, a written record of an earlier conversation rather than a legal order, gave William no new constitutional power and could not overrule the sovereign. Its purpose was narrower but important. If family pressure threatened the Wales household's ability to manage its own staff, engagements, and preparation for succession, she had promised to support his right to resist that pressure. William understood why her support mattered. The Princess Royal had spent decades inside the machinery of monarchy, without chasing greater ceremonial influence, and that history made her intervention difficult to dismiss as ambition. He trusted her because she understood royal precedent, meaning the customs and past practices used to guide decisions when no direct rule exists. Anne, however, knew that defending him might wound Charles. Anne stopped outside the king's door and hesitated. Supporting William meant telling Charles that their mother's private concerns had included tensions surrounding his own household. The thought troubled her. When she finally entered, the prince followed soon after and told his aunt that Elizabeth's memory must not become a weapon. Catherine agreed. She wanted a boundary recognized, not Camilla defeated. Anne opened the documented account and read the passage she had recorded after her private conversation with Elizabeth. The late monarch believed the next heir needed enough independence to prepare his own household for eventual succession, the formal transfer of the crown to the next sovereign. Charles listened without interrupting. The king's silence grew heavier, because the words did not accuse him, yet they forced him to confront a fear his mother had carried privately. Charles finally answered. Coordination between royal households was necessary, he said, because the monarchy could not function as competing centers. But Camilla's directive had gone beyond coordination. The king accepted that her office should not have tried to impose a restructuring on William and Catherine without their agreement. Anne heard the distinction, and so did the prince. William had won recognition of the boundary, but nobody felt victorious. Charles now faced the harder task. He would have to tell Camilla that he would not reverse the refusal. For her, that decision would not feel administrative. It would feel personal. Defeat inside a royal household does not arrive with applause or an official announcement. It arrives quietly. A meeting disappears from the diary. Staff receive new instructions. A door that once seemed open suddenly requires permission. And for Camilla, the most painful moment comes not when William refuses her proposal, but when Charles confirms that he will not force his son and daughter-in-law to accept it. Camilla heard the consequences before she heard the explanation. The restructuring proposal was withdrawn. The Wales household would keep control of its own staff and schedules, and any future coordination with Buckingham Palace had to be negotiated rather than imposed. Buckingham Palace, the monarch's principal working residence and administrative center, could still coordinate royal duties, but it would not dictate how William and Catherine managed their household. Anne made the settlement even clearer. Princess Anne advised in a private conversation that the pact should now return to private status because its purpose had been fulfilled. She wanted no faction, no permanent anti-Camilla alliance, and no public campaign built around Elizabeth's memory. For her, the agreement had been a shield against overreach, not a weapon to keep using after the danger had passed. Charles then spoke to his wife alone. The king told Camilla he understood why she wanted closer coordination, but he could not support the way her office had tried to impose it. She stayed motionless before asking the question beneath all the others. Did William now dictate terms to them? Charles answered carefully. His son was not dictating terms to the crown. He was defending the limits of his own household. Camilla looked away. The distinction left her with nowhere to press the argument. During that same private conversation, Charles also confirmed that Anne had advised William beforehand to reject any unilateral restructuring. The Queen Consort realized the resistance had not been improvised in anger. A defensive line had existed before she entered the room, and that knowledge made the defeat feel colder. Catherine refused to retreat afterward. She sent Anne a short personal message thanking her for defending the principle involved, and William saw it. Kate's message told him something important. She no longer intended to remain passive when decisions threatened the boundaries around their family. Yet the prince did not feel victorious. William admitted his fear to Catherine later that evening. He had protected their household, but he wondered whether he had damaged something harder to repair. Charles was still his father. The crown was still his future. And now he feared that defending one might have wounded his relationship with the other more deeply than either man was ready to admit for many years. After the confrontation, the most important conversation happens without courtiers, secretaries, or advisors. William and Anne sit alone. No one is present to record their words. No protocol determines who speaks first. For the first time that day, the future king stops arguing about authority and admits what is actually troubling him. He can survive Camilla's anger, but he is not certain he can accept becoming estranged from Charles while preparing to inherit everything his father represents. Anne lets the silence settle before answering. Charles has already upheld the independence of William's household, so there is no order left to resist and no immediate institutional battle left to fight. The princess explains that the pact was never meant to create rival royal camps. It existed so William could draw a firm line early enough to stop disagreement from hardening into permanent resentment. William finally says what he has avoided all day. Every conversation about succession makes Charles seem less like his father and more like the man whose place he will one day take. Succession, the process by which the crown passes from one monarch to the next, has become painfully personal. The prince admits that today's confrontation pushed them further into those roles, and that frightens him more than Camilla's anger ever could. Anne does not comfort him with easy words. She tells her nephew that defending a boundary is only half of leadership. The harder test is giving dignity back to someone after they have crossed it. William understands immediately. She is asking him to meet Camilla again, not because the Queen Consort was right, but because victory without restraint could turn a necessary stand into a lasting family wound. Anne then explains the final instruction Elizabeth gave her in their private conversation about the pact. Once the safeguard had done its job, the late queen wanted it emotionally dissolved. It was a shield, not a weapon. Her recorded understanding was never meant to become a permanent argument against Charles or Camilla, and William hears the warning beneath those words. William makes his choice. He will meet Charles and Camilla together, and offer reconciliation without surrender. Catherine supports him when he tells her privately, but she sets one condition. Peace cannot require pretending the directive was acceptable. The prince agrees. Their boundary will remain. For William, that meant protecting his father without surrendering the future he would inherit. Then the outside world intrudes. Fragments of the confrontation begin reaching reporters, and private restraint suddenly collides with public speculation. Inside the family, compromise has finally become possible. Beyond the palace gates, however, the story is already becoming something none of them can fully control. By evening, what began behind closed doors has become impossible to contain. Broadcasters interrupt their schedules. Palace correspondents race between competing interpretations. Crowds slow outside royal gates. staring at phones and exchanging theories. Yet one image captures the public mood better than any debate. William and Catherine leaving together, composed and side by side, while the country tries to understand what exactly they have just resisted. Charles watches the coverage with the television muted. The headlines describe an extraordinary dispute over the independence of the Wales household, while palace communications avoid calling it a constitutional crisis. A constitutional crisis means a conflict that threatens the rules governing how the monarchy and state operate. This dispute has not reached that level, but the king understands why the language matters. One careless phrase could turn a family boundary dispute into something far larger. Catherine hears her own name repeated across broadcasts and feels the story slipping away from the people who lived it. One presenter calls her the decisive partner in William's resistance, while another asks whether private family disagreements are becoming entangled with royal authority. Kate quietly switches off the television. She does not see herself as an antagonist. She believes she defended the household where her family lives, and where the future king prepares for what comes next. Outside Buckingham Palace, the public reaction becomes impossible to ignore. A small evening crowd gathers near the gates, as newspaper vendors raise a front page dominated by William and Catherine, beneath the words, "The line they would not cross." Buckingham Palace, the monarch's principal working residence, has long served as a public symbol of royal authority. Phones rise almost instantly. The page is photographed, shared, debated, and turned into a symbol of generational conflict. Anne becomes the unexpected center of the story. Broadcasters begin discussing the documented pact she recorded after private conversations with Elizabeth, and the Princess Royal's role changes the public interpretation. What first looked like a sudden rebellion now appears to have roots in an older safeguard against internal overreach. William sees that shift too, and he knows public sympathy can become dangerous if it turns family disagreement into competing camps. Charles refuses to let that happen. He calls William, Catherine, Camilla, and Anne together one final time. The king is no longer interested in proving who won. He wants the argument ended before speculation hardens into permanent division. Camilla agrees to attend, and Anne does the same. The world sees winners and losers. Behind palace doors, however, the family now faces a harder choice: preserve the grievance, or decide what kind of monarchy will emerge from it. Then the doors close behind them. The final meeting contains none of the fury of the first. There is no document waiting to be rejected, and no hidden agreement left to expose. What remains is more difficult. 4 people must decide whether today's victory becomes tomorrow's family wound. William has proved he will defend his household. Catherine has proved she will stand beside him. Anne has fulfilled her promise. And Camilla must now decide whether accepting a boundary means accepting defeat or preserving something larger than herself. Charles speaks first. The king confirms that the Wales household will retain control of its operations, engagements, and family arrangements. Buckingham Palace, the monarch's administrative center, will continue coordinating duties, but changes must come through mutual agreement. William listens without triumph. Catherine understands the distinction. Cooperation survives, but control ends. Anne places the memorandum into William's hands and tells him its purpose is complete. The memorandum, a written record rather than a constitutional order, existed for one danger: to stop pressure from becoming control. Princess Anne makes clear that the pact ends here. She supported the prince when the boundary was crossed. Now she refuses to let that safeguard become a permanent faction. William turns to Camilla with respect but without retreat. He tells the queen consort that rejecting the directive was never meant to diminish her place beside Charles. Yet Catherine's position and their household cannot be overridden. Camilla remains silent before conceding that she pushed the restructuring too far. She believes closer coordination had value, but accepts that the method crossed a line. Kate answers quietly, and the bitterness begins to loosen. Charles remains with William after the others leave. The king tells his son that protecting the future crown may sometimes require resisting the present one. The crown, meaning the institution of monarchy rather than simply the person wearing it, depends on that honesty. William admits his fear was never losing an argument. It was losing his father. Charles reaches for his shoulder, and neither man needs another speech. Anne's pact has achieved what Elizabeth feared might become necessary. It did not remove Camilla, weaken Charles, or hand William unchecked power. It forced the family to separate loyalty from submission and cooperation from control. The monarchy survives because nobody needs to be destroyed for a boundary to hold. The secret pact protected the future, then ended. William and Catherine keep their independence. Camilla accepts the limit. Charles preserves the family. Anne steps back. And the future king learns that preserving the crown sometimes begins with knowing when to say no. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.